Shalom again, everybody. Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com, bringing to you today's daily lesson in the Sefer Yetzirah. Today is lesson number 52, and of course we dedicate these classes to the safety, the health, the well-being, and prosperity of everybody around the globe today who is, of course, facing trials and tribulations and obstacles, the likes of which we're trying to help you understand are really opportunities that you need to explore and discover. That's exactly where we are at in our text of understanding. We are in the third chapter, the third Mishnah, and we're talking about the three foundational mothers, the Aleph, the Mem, and the Shin. We've already identified them with the fundamental principles, powers of expansion, contraction, and balance that we find everywhere in nature. In this specific Mishnah, we've now introduced a new concept called Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. And then they throw this in. They had to do it, didn't they? Zachar v'nekeva, male and female. You'll notice that we don't really mention that before. Granted, the term imot for mothers indicates female, and fathers come later. Now, here is a very interesting view of the relationship of male and female. I know people are going to want to interpret this within a sociological context of the modern day, in quote, war between the sexes. But let's look to nature itself and understand the relationship of male and female. First, obviously, which comes first, the male or the female? Well, for those of you who are going to quote to me the Bible, and you're going to say, well, male came first. God's a man, and he created Adam, who was a man, and Eve, and the women only came later. So being that the man comes first and woman comes later, man is dominant and female is submissive. I'm sorry, even to say those words, as facetious and unjust as they are, for me is still very, very funny. Why? Because needless to say, nothing could be further from the truth. As we understand male and female, let's review some of those ideas. God is a man. Is he really? We refer to God as a he, but you know something? I've made it very clear in my writings for years now. You really shouldn't, because Hebrew does not have a neutral gender pronoun. There's only male and female. So God is always referred to in the male. However, it is very, very clear from the Bible, like it says in Genesis, God created man in his image, male and female. God is both male and female. No, it does not mean God is a physiological, a biological creation who has both male and female anatomical parts. Come on, let's not be ridiculous, I pray. But recognize the forces of energy. And we refer to certain sephirotic forces as being male and certain sephirotic forces as being female. Did we not say the right column, which is expansive, is called the male, and the left column, which is called the restrictive, is the female? So which one is dominant? Which one is primary? You cannot say one against the other. They're both equal, but yet they're opposites, and therefore require the creation in the center. Look at this, if you will, from an atomic point of view. Take, for example, any molecular structure that we all know so well. Take, for example, common table salt, sodium chloride. Right? Sodium by itself is almost formed like a metal. Chloride by itself, chlorine, is like a gas. Right? Chlorine by itself is not very, very conducive to health. And sodium by itself is not very conducive to health, but you put the two together and they become sodium chloride, which is salt, which becomes essential to health. You see, the sodium and the chloride merge in such a way, it's like a 1-to-3 ratio. It's 2-to-3, 4-to-6, however you want to look at it. And it transforms them. When we copulate sexually, you have the DNA of the male, the DNA of the female, and they come together, and what does it form? It never, ever replicates one or the other. It always merges and brings the two together. And only by the littlest amount of a genetic factor is there the materialization of either male or a female. Now, in psychology, Carl Jung shows us that even psychologically, that the majority, which we know from the actual anatomical gender, is materialized. So, for example, my body, as you know, is male. All right? As a male, I have developed a masculine psychology corresponding to my male anatomy. However, within me, as in within all males of the species, 49% is female. Beneath the surface, Jung always referred to this as the inner male or female, the inner anima or animus he referred to it as. And within every female, who is 51% female, materialized as the female body, has within her 49% male and her own inner anima, animus, as the case may be. Now, why is this important? Because emesh, olam, shana, nefesh, when we're talking about these forces and they materialize where? Within the box of our three-dimensional space. Consciousness, nefesh, is the materialization. Nefesh is the materialization of consciousness in this three-dimensional box in which we live. But a point made very clear to our sages, by the Kabbalists, is that there are higher levels of soul. A soul is not just a blob of light. It's a level, accomplishment of consciousness. There is the higher levels called ruach, neshama, chaya yechida. These are levels of consciousness which need to be embraced, absorbed. And as we go higher, each level of consciousness materializes to the individual in the opposite sexuality of the person. So, for example, for many a male, their higher soul will always be female. And that is why they experience God as the Shekhina, the divine presence corresponding to the Sefer Malkhut, which is always feminine. The Kabbalah of Rabbi Chaim Vital and the Ariel, they refer to this Malkhut as Rachel or Leah, as the case may be, all in the feminine. Mothers. Oh, here we go, mothers. We're back to the good old mom. But now let's go a wee bit deeper than that. I've made this point in other classes as well. If you are a Navi prophet or a Kohen, especially a high priest, Kohen Gadol, and you were to have an experience of the divine, and you're going to see a picture of God. Now, if you remember Daniel sees an image of God with the big, long, flowing hair, etc., and so on. Never says that he saw the face now, did he? Daniel is describing a male figure, but that's not an objective reality. It's a subjective one. If you remember, he says he sees something no one else did. All right? Subjective. But Daniel, as we've learned in our previous classes, was not a prophet. He was a seer, a Jose. He had a lower level of experience. But those at the higher level, they saw the Shekhina. And the Shekhina, by definition of the word, is female. So if you were a high priest and you walked into the Holy of Holies and you saw the actual divine kavod energy of God, it would have had a female face, not a male face. And that is why throughout the Bible, Yud Ke Vav Ke always acts with an emotional streak, which is very, very female. The way that Yud Ke Vav Ke responds, reacts against witches, witchcraft, idolatry, etc., is the, I think it is, normal way a female responds to a threat to her position with her mate. Right? I know how men are with women. I know how women are with men. Jealousy is a natural, normal, healthy energy that literally creates balance of harmony within things. So now let's get back to our Sefer Yetzirah. That which we call female is in the beginning. When we refer to the Ein Sof in Kabbalah, it's a nothing. But the first thing that's materialized is what's called the contraction of energy, which Rabbi Chaim and others say is actually a female expression. So to answer the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? In this case, male or female? Female became first. Female is higher. And especially for those of you who have gone through the Otzrot Haim material, I'll put a link to it here in the notes here. You know that when we talk about the shattering of the vessels and the fall of the primordial kings, we should call them the primordial queens, because the original form was matriarchal. And when that fell, the male came in to elevate, but it restores the matriarchy. It restores the mothers. So this is the whole secret of what we call in Kabbalah Ma and Ben. In other traditions, they'll refer to this as yin and yang, but we refer to it in ours because that's who we are. But within the context, we must understand the nature of that which we call the Hesed and the Din, the right and the left, and the necessity of balance. So in modern time, well, let me take a step back from modern times. Throughout the centuries, you've always had the male being oppressive upon the female. And now you have the reversal, where in which the female is starting to be oppressive on the male. Well, it was an old saying I learned from my mother: two wrongs don't make a right. There has to be the proper balance and harmony and respect and balance for each other. Males, should never be female, and females should never be male. There has to be a proper balance. Okay, this is all political and social and psychological. What does this have to do with Sefer Yetzirah? The answer is emesh, everything. How do you know the proper balance or definition or identity of what is male? How do you know the proper identity, position, and place of female? Should I tell you as the authoritative rabbi? Who am I? I am just a male. Maybe I'm more, maybe I'm less, but that's irrelevant. Who are you? You are like me. Maybe we have answers. I'm sure we all have answers. I'm sure we can all ask different questions and come up with different answers. None of that matters. You are going to look at the Aleph and the Mem and the Shin. And I'm going to look at the Aleph and the Mem and the Shin. And as we're going to start seeing in our future Mishnayot here in this chapter, all of a sudden, like we discussed in our previous classes, how you look is going to shift and change. So if you look through the male model, you will see through the Shin. If you look through the female model, you will look through the Mem. If you look through the center column, which can only be accomplished when the Mem and the Shin are in proper harmony and balance, only then can you look down the center path and see both in harmony. That's the nature of the Aleph. But you don't get to balance in the beginning. So this is why when we have our dimensions of space, time, consciousness in space and time, again, is called Nefesh, consciousness. That's why they use the term Nefesh as opposed to Neshama, etc. Nefesh, consciousness, is understanding the world around us. It's related to what we call Ma'aseh Bereshit, the secrets of creation, which is what we are studying here. Creation science, if you will. Spiritual technology. This is what this is all about. So as you contemplate these things as we've described in hitbonenut forms of mind expansion meditation, You seek to understand the nature of the movement of space and the movement of time. Modern science and scientists do a very good job of this. And of course, they might not use the Hebrew language and the words of the Sefer Yetzirah to describe their discoveries. They use the words of modern physics, and they'll throw in words like proton, electron, and neutron, as opposed to a right and a left and a center column. They'll refer to quarks and muons and leptons and all these other kinds of scientific stuff, as opposed to what we might refer to as otiot and letters and combinations. They will refer to the chemical combinations of compounds. We will refer to the permutation of letters. They're really one and the same if you understand it correctly. This is Nefesh, again, Nefesh consciousness, wherein which I look to the world around me and I try to understand the underlying forces of how it works. This was the original prophetic Torah of the sages. Previous, it was the biblical prophets. They did not have a Gemara, a Talmud, and many, many books. They would contemplate in nature, which is still the form that we're supposed to practice today. When you go out and you look around and you gaze in nature, you remember the famous Midrash that states in the beginning, God gazed into the Torah, and from the Torah created the universe. So all of the universe comes out of the Torah. So if I want to study Torah, how do I study the Torah? Do I need books? I always tell people there comes a time that when you have to close the books and open your heart and mind to study true Torah. Now, if you're studying to become a rabbi and you need to be a communal leader, yes, you need to know Talmud and Halakha and Shulchan Aruch and all these things. But if that's not your calling, you're just a regular everyday person, then of course you need to, from an Orthodox Jewish point of view, know the practices and observances of our faith. But beyond that, you need to study the universal Torah, which is open for everybody. Now, we refer to this universal energy as Torah. In the Oriental tradition, they refer to this as the Tao. And if you would read the philosophy of the likes of Laozi in his book, the famous book Tao De Jing, and you read that and you go, this guy sounds like he's teaching Torah. And I'll bet you he was. Does that mean he had a connection to ancient Israelites or Jews? Maybe, maybe not. I can't say. What I could say is I recognize the teachings and I recognize the source. No, I'm not a Taoist. I'm Ben Torah. But at the same time, I recognize what the Kabbalists refer to as the galut, or the exile of the Torah, as it takes its many forms in combinations of letters. Remember, the letters realign and redefine in different ways. So the letters will form in the Hebraic mind as Aleph, Bet, Gimel. And in the Chinese, they will take whatever the forms of the letters there, or the Japanese, or the Korean, or for that matter, the Indian and the Sanskrit and all the others. But everyone has the context of male and female. Space has a male component to it and a female component to it. Contemplate that. Time has a male component and a female component to it. Contemplate that. Women, you know as much as I do, even when it comes to interactions with members of the opposite sex, men and women, we all have different energies, different times which are more conducive than others, different places which are more conducive to others. Contemplate these things and understand the universal Tao, the universal Torah, the Nefesh, the flow of how male and female perceive things from this side or that side. And then you will come to recognize and appreciate the wise words, as it says in the Psalms, Torah Hashem Tamimah, that the Torah of Hashem is Tamimah. The Hebrew word should read simple. And then it says Ma'ashivat Nefesh, restores your soul. Because the soul is that center of the balance. It's the Aleph, the breath of the center which then enables you to swing to the right male, to the left female, and work its way around. Now, for those of you who might argue and say, well, why is male right and female left? Well, that's from one perspective. That's from this perspective looking out. But if I'm looking from that perspective looking in, I might see the opposite. Now, don't I? All depends on how you perceive things. We'll get more into this next classes. Check out the courses that I have in the notes below, and I will see you in our next class. Shalom.